Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll get right to the business at hand, and that is this wonderful Protestant book entitled The History of Romanism by John Dowling. This is history that your pastors and priesters have hidden from you. Historical evidence that makes all the difference in your understanding of Bible prophecy. We're told specifically in the Bible who the Antichrist is. And we have history to prove it. And that's the history that we're studying. And yesterday, we finished our discussion about the profligate life of some of the popes. One in particular, John the 10th. Pope John the 10th, or more correctly, Antichrist John the 10th. Now, this pope was elevated to the papacy by his prostitute, Theodora. Now, wait a minute, Tom. You got to be kidding me. A prostitute elevated the pope to the papacy? How in the world does that happen? How in the world does a prostitute gain so much power and influence as to elevate one of her customers to the papacy? Well, the answer is fairly easy if you stop and think about it. What is most valuable to a prostitute after she's been paid and after she's spent the money? Her power of blackmail. That's right. The power of blackmail is more powerful and worth more in terms of wealth than is the money she earned performing her services. So it was the power of blackmail whereby Theodora could elevate John to the papacy. Now, you're telling me, Tom, that she had power of blackmail. Who would she blackmail? How about the College of Cardinals? Theodora was a very popular prostitute among the Roman Catholic hierarchy. And Theodora wanted John elevated to the papacy. And do you think she made enough money being a prostitute to buy his papacy? There's no mention at all of her use of money to elevate John to the papacy. So what power did she have? She had the power to blackmail the entire College of Cardinals. You make John the Pope, or I'm going to tell the world that you've been a frequent customer of mine for years and years and years. So they made John the Pope. Theodora was very powerful, as are all prostitutes. They have the power of blackmail. And the more powerful and prestigious and wealthy you are, the more power she has. So she elevated John the 10th to his position as Pope in the Roman Catholic Church. See, now it's not so unbelievable, is it? And it still goes on today. Prostitutes still have a great deal of power. More power than most people conceive. Now, it was a matter of history that a prostitute pretty much controlled the Vatican. This is admitted by Roman Catholic historians. That's why we're reading these accounts, because these are the beliefs and teachings of these Roman Catholic historians. These are facts, accepted facts. The profligate lives of the popes are known and shamelessly admitted by Roman Catholic historians. Now, we're going to see how they kind of sweep it all under the rug so you can see for yourself just how devious the Roman Catholic religion is. But for now, we'll concentrate on the examples that this author gives us of the profligate lives of the popes. We've concluded with John the 10th, and now we're going to go to John the 11th. This is subsection 34, near the bottom of page 217 if you're following along. Subsection 34, page 217, John the 11th. This pope was the bastard son of His Holiness Pope Sergius III. Now, wait a minute. The bastard son, isn't that kind of a contradiction in terms? Yes, and it's intended to be a contradiction in terms to draw your attention. How can the son of a pope be a bastard if his father's name is known, his identity is known, Holiness Pope Sergius III? Because popes, under Roman Catholic canon law, popes and priests are forbidden to marry. Okay? So, it's a play on words. It's an acknowledgement that this is the illegitimate son of Sergius III. Now, it's a common thing, believe it or not, among the popes to have offspring, despite the fact that they're sworn to celibacy and chastity. They mess around. You know, they say, do as I say, not as I do. Okay? They're all hypocrites, every one of them. Even the priests were all familiar with the vows of chastity and celibacy among the priesthood of the Roman Catholic Church, but their victims lie scattered all over the world. Their sexual victims lie scattered all over the world. It's in the newspapers occasionally. It's just a dirty little subject that the world would like to sweep under the rug and ignore. But it's grown to the point where it can no longer be ignored. I'm speaking specifically about the Roman Catholic priest pedophile pandemic around the world. Now, this is really kind of a sad state of affairs for all the poor women who've been debauched by these priests, since we focus only on the young boys that the priests have debauched. But let me tell you, there are plenty of female victims of these Roman Catholic priests. The sexual crimes of the Roman Catholic clergy is monumental. It's a biblical proportion. And it has been a constant problem within the clergy of the Roman Catholic Church almost from the very beginning of the Roman Catholic Church. And it will be so until Christ returns, because man just simply does not have the righteous fortitude to put a stop to it. I mean, after all, if the Pope claims the power to excommunicate, and the Pope can command the world's armies, and the world's militias, and the world's secret service agencies, no one in his right mind, if he wanted to preserve his own life, would make an issue of the sexual depravity of the priests. So they just continue. And they're only going to get worse. As long as they're accepted by the world as possessing unlimited power and authority, as long as they're revered and feared by the people of this world, nothing will ever be done about it. And we have history to record those, the consequences suffered by those who dared to stand up and point the finger at the papacy and call it for what it is. Antichrist. The world is soaked with their blood, and that won't change until Christ returns either. Okay? So Pope John XI, this pope was the bastard son of His Holiness Pope Sergius III, who, as we have seen, was one of the favored lovers of the notorious prostitute Marozia. The death of Pope Stephen in 931 AD presented to the ambitious Marozia, says the historian Mosheim on page 392 of his work, quote, an object worthy of its grasp, and accordingly she raised to the papal dignity John the 11th, who was the fruit of her lawless amours with one of the pretended successors of St. Peter, whose adulterous commerce gave an infallible guide to the Roman Catholic Church. So she's well known and loved among the Roman Catholic clergy. Okay? The papal chair comes open, and she, through her power of blackmail, elevated John the 11th to the papal chair, one of her favorite customers. Okay? She didn't do it with money. She did it with blackmail. You either raise my favorite customer, John the 11th, to the papal chair, or I'm going to out you all. So they elevated John the 11th to the papal chair. Here we have a prostitute electing popes. Okay? Most powerful prostitute. She's only powerful because she has serviced the most noteworthy of the Roman Catholic hierarchy. And if it were to become widely known, why, the Roman Catholic Church might suffer. The papacy might suffer the consequences. So, the College of Cardinals does whatever the prostitute wants. Subsection 35. Here's John the 12th. This monster of wickedness was a nephew of John the Bastard. Okay, the previous pope. The last name pope, and through the influence and dominance of the dominant Tuscan party in Rome, was raised to the popedom at the age of 18 years. Hey, he was 18 years old. Divine and infallible at 18 years old. Gee whiz, I wish I could claim that glory. I wasn't so divine or infallible at the year of 18. I was trouble. But here we have an 18-year-old in the very seat of power, the Vatican. And it says his tyranny and debaucheries were so abominable that upon the complaint of the people of Rome, the Emperor Otho caused him to be solemnly tried and deposed. Okay? They held a trial. He was convicted of his crimes, and he was deposed from the papacy. You see now why it is today that through the Roman Catholic canon law, the papacy says, I am above all kings. I am above all judges. I, the Pope, am judge of every man, and no man may judge me. That's what's included in Roman Catholic canon law. See, before they had that stipulation in Roman Catholic canon law, the emperor could bring a charge against the Pope for his depravity, his debauchery, his prostitution, his incest, his murders, and put him in jail. Take him off the papal throne and put him in jail. Yes, that's right. The emperor had the power to put the vicar of Christ in jail. Well, that's not the case today, as we see from the attempts of the world to try and convict Pope Benedict XVI for leading a world full of pedophile priests and then putting them up in luxurious trappings at the Vatican if the courts came after them to try to bring them to justice. And in the case of the current Pope, Antichrist Pope Francis I, and if his crimes were ever revealed to their totality, the crimes that he committed as a Jesuit priest in Argentina, they'd put him in prison and then burn the prison. So they made him Pope. That's why Benedict XVI was elected Pope, and that's why Francis I was elected Pope. World-class criminals. Nothing has changed. We're reading this history of these debauched popes as though it were a figment of the past. Nothing has changed. I want my people, my listeners, to know nothing has changed. When they elect someone to the papacy, you are looking at a world-class criminal. And all you have to do is investigate their lives and to discover why they were made popes. To take advantage of the Roman Catholic canon law protection. No one may bring a pope to trial, not even the world court. And of course, since they made Pope Francis I the pope, all of his accusers have been rendered silent. There's no one out campaigning and trying to inform the world of his unspeakable crimes in Argentina anymore, because they know what it would get them if they did. The Pope now has the power of the kings of the earth on his side. And anyone who brings a charge against Pope Francis I would be rubbed out. That's how much power the Pope wields. All right, he was vulnerable when he was a Jesuit provincial in Argentina, but as Pope, no one can touch him. And that's why his accusers have gone away. All right, back in history, Pope John XII, his tyranny and debaucheries were so abominable that upon the complaint of the people of Rome, the Emperor Otho caused him to be solemnly tried and deposed. In other words, taken off of his throne. Upon the emperor's ambassadors coming to that city, they carried back to their master an account of the notorious scandals of which the Pope was guilty. That, quote, he carried on in the eyes of the whole city, that's Rome, a criminal commerce with one Rhaenyra, the widow of one of his soldiers, and had presented her with crosses and chalices of gold belonging to the church of St. Peter. That another of his concubines, yes, he had many concubines, that another of his concubines named Stephania had lately died in giving birth to one of the Pope's bastards, that he had changed the Lateran Palace, that's the old church at the Vatican, the Lateran Palace, that's the real seat of power and authority. Whenever the Pope speaks ex cathedra, he speaks from the throne at the Lateran Church. The modern St. Peter's Cathedral that you see all the time in the pictures and everything, that's not the true seat of power. It's the Lateran Palace is the Pope's true throne, okay? This Pope had changed that Lateran Palace, once the abode of saints, according to Roman Catholic teaching, into a brothel. And there he cohabited with his own father's concubine, who was a sister of Stephania, and that he had forced married women, widows, and virgins to comply with his impure desires, who had come from other countries to visit the tombs of the apostles at Rome, unquote. This is undisputed history. Roman Catholic historians and Protestant historians both agree this is what happened. He turned the Lateran Palace into a whorehouse. And he used it as a place of power to influence every female that walked in the door that caught his eye. Now he says, upon the arrival of Otho, Pope John fled the city. Strange, isn't it, that the vicar of God on earth should have to flee from anyone? But anyway, he fled the city, and it says several bishops and others testified to the emperor and about the above enormities, besides several other offenses. And I would like to know what those several other offenses are. Namely, they're probably too despicable to even put in print. Okay? Listen, the Vatican and politicians around the world have this one great advantage. If they want to commit a crime and they don't want to be accused by anyone, they simply commit a crime so egregious, so debased, so demonic, that no one wants to even admit that they occurred. That's why the criminals in Washington, D.C. are never brought to justice. One case is President George W. Bush. His crime was overseeing the events of 9/11. The toppling of those two buildings, more buildings, three buildings, Building 7 toppled. The thousands of lives that were lost in the melee, and the thousands and thousands of lives that were lost in the cleanup and are who still dying today. And also overseeing this act of destruction right downtown in Manhattan with the cameras rolling at high noon a day, at 8 o'clock in the morning on a very sunny morning. These crimes took place before the eyes of the American people and the eyes of the entire world. And it only took 30 days for official claims of government involvement in 9/11. But what did the President of the United States do? Carried on like he was innocent, and then accused foreign leaders for having conducted 9/11, put the blame on them, and led this whole nation into a perpetual war in the Middle East. Now that is a crime so heinous, so ugly, so outrageous, that even when people know it, they won't talk about it. Listen, if George W. Bush was so wicked as to oversee 9/11 and the destruction of so many lives and so many hundreds of millions of dollars of property in downtown Manhattan, do you think he would even stop to pause to kill someone who brought such a charge against him? And that's why everybody's quiet. And for those who are not quiet, those architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth and many, many other organizations, the pilots, the pilot organizations that say it's impossible for some of these aerobatic maneuvers that were conducted on that day by these heavy, wide-bodied, multi-engine jets to strike those towers and all the other things that took place, virtually impossible. It had to be military hardware that did this. They're laughed at by the masses. They're scoffed at as troublemakers because they'd rather believe the lie. They'd rather believe 19 towel-headed camel jockeys knocked down those twin towers and led this world to war against the Muslim world. They'd rather believe George W. Bush's lies. They'd rather champion George W. Bush as a hero and a warrior for this country, a faithful, patriotic warrior for this country, to preserve our liberties, when in fact he brought us nothing but tyranny. So the secret has been known among the popes and the priests and the politicians of the world. If you want to get away with a crime, make that crime so egregious, so wicked, so unthinkable that no one would dare bring a charge against you without soiling their own reputations. And that's why the world is such a horrible place to live today. We're going to get right back to it. The time's going too fast. Look, I know this is an ugly subject, but it's a subject that's been hidden from you for a purpose, so that you cannot know who the Antichrist is. It's valuable information to know this history of the profligate lives of the priests and the popes of Rome. You see, they'd have you believe that the Antichrist has never even come upon the world yet, that it's a future single individual. It's an outrageous lie. God's people have always known who the Antichrist is. Every generation of Christian every generation of Christians has had their witness testifying in indefatigable terms that the papacy is, was, and always will be the Antichrist. There was never any guesswork about it. What do you think the people of God were doing when they heard about all these goings-on in Rome? That papacies were elevated by prostitutes on threat of blackmail? Was this not truly the man of sin, the one Paul predicted, the one Daniel predicted, and the one John predicted? Does not the papacy fulfill every prophecy in the Bible about the man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist? Absolutely, without question. And Rome just couldn't shed the onus, especially during the Protestant Reformation, when the majority of Christians came to this realization. Or the realization that the papacy is, was, and always will be the Antichrist was revived. Okay? It was silenced during the Inquisitions by the threat of death and torture. But the crimes of the papacy rose to such a degree and a level that it couldn't be denied anymore, even by Roman Catholics. And so the Protestant reformers came out of the Roman Catholic Church, first attempting to reform the Roman Catholic Church by eliminating the papacy altogether, which failed. And the papacy did what she always does, leveled a declaration of an all-out war of annihilation against the Protestants, and it goes on today. And so do the profligate lives of the popes. And how is it that we are so ignorant today about who the Antichrist is, when every Christian of every generation had perfect witness testimony of the papacy's satanic origin? Why doesn't somebody tell you about the satanic life of Benedict XVI? Why doesn't somebody tell you about the satanic life of the current Pope, Pope Francis I? And if they did tell you, would you believe it? Would you equate that with the history of Antichrist, as all Christians did prior to about the early 1800s? No, because you're so convinced that the Antichrist is a future individual. They've used the very pulpits of your churches to defend the papacy by putting the onus of Antichrist onto a future speculation. You've been lied to all your life, just like I've been. And you ought to be angry about it. And you ought to do something about it. We've all got a responsibility. If we know these truths, how will we face the Almighty God when we meet Him face to face if we remain silent about this? What excuse will we give to our Savior for knowing these truths and remaining silent about them? How will I face Christ if I should ever quit Inquisition Update? Now, the crimes of this Pope John were so widespread, so egregious, that it rose the attention of the Emperor Otho. And Otho went after him. Otho went after him. The Emperor went after the Pope to bring him to justice. It says, upon the arrival of Otho, Pope John fled the city. You know what? The same thing would happen today if a godly king went after these world-class criminals. They would flee the city, and they would prove once again that they are not the vicars of Christ. But no one's got the courage. Everyone's afraid of this phony in Rome. And the more powerful they are, the more fearful they are. It says, upon the arrival of Otho, Pope John fled the city. Several bishops and others testified to the emperor the above enormities, besides several other offenses which remain unnamed. Crimes beyond human comprehension. Crimes so hideous they cannot be uttered. And it says the emperor summoned him to appear, saying in the letter he addressed to him, quote, you are charged with such obscenities as would make us blush were they said by a stage player, by an actor in the pretend world. He says, I shall mention to you a few of the crimes that are laid at your charge, for it would require a whole day to enumerate them all. Now then, that you are accused not by some few, but by all the clergy as well as the laity of murder, perjury, sacrilege, and incest with your own two sisters, etc., etc. What do you suppose the etc., etc. means? Unspeakable. Now, they could speak about incest with his own two sisters, but they couldn't speak about the rest. Not in writing, at least. The emperor continues, he says, we therefore earnestly entreat you to come and clear yourself of these imputations, unquote. To this letter, His Holiness returned the following laconic answer, quote, John, servant of the servants of God, to all bishops. We hear that you want to make another pope. If that is your design, I excommunicate you all in the name of the Almighty, that you may not have it in your power to ordain any other pope or even to celebrate Mass, unquote. Now look, for a Roman Catholic, not being able to eat Jesus, not to have grace infused, means you're damned. If you don't come to Mass, you're damned. Okay? That's an unforgivable sin in the Roman Catholic Church. If you can't eat Jesus, grace cannot be infused. The Bible plainly says you are saved by grace through faith, right? No, in the Roman Catholic Church you're saved by grace, but only if you eat it. Faith has nothing to do with it. You have to eat the Jesus cookie. Okay? The consecrated host, the Eucharist. You have to come to Mass. And if you're not allowed to come to Mass, then you die in your sin, according to Roman Catholic teaching. And the Pope, this most profligate of popes, simply wove his hand, uttered his papal thunder, and the whole world shook. I excommunicate you. You know, what a celebration one should have to be excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church. That's the day a potential life can begin, when you are excommunicated from the synagogue of Satan. But if you're a Roman Catholic, and you think that the Roman Catholic Church is the only church from which you can obtain salvation, then to be excommunicated from the church is to be eternally damned. And that's the power that the Pope has over the kings of the earth. But not this king. He said, regardless of this threat, however, the emperor and council deposed this, quote, monster without one single virtue to atone for his many vices, as he was called by the bishops in council, and proceeded to elect a successor. Okay? It didn't work this time. The emperor stood his ground, and so did the council. They ousted this demon and just put another in his place. Okay? The papacy is, was, and always will be the Antichrist. There were never any good popes, as you will hear some people say. There were never any good popes. How can the Antichrist of Scripture be good in any context? Okay? Jesus said, when somebody said, "Good master," he said, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good." What Jesus was doing was testifying that he was indeed the good master. He was God. But there were no good antichrists, despite what the most popular broadcaster says today. No matter what anyone ever tells you, there were no good popes. That office is reserved for the man of sin, the son of perdition, the beast, the Antichrist. There were no good popes. He says, "Still be it remembered, this monster, this quote-unquote monster, John the 12th, is reckoned among the regular line of popes." That's right, he's still canonized in the Roman Catholic Church. He's still a legitimate member of the succession of St. Peter. They haven't done away with his record. They haven't pretended that he didn't exist. They still include him in the list of popes, the College of Popes. He says the next of the name is called John the 13th, and he is therefore an essential, necessary link in the boasted chain of holy apostolic succession. They can't wipe away John the 12th. They can't wipe away any of their popes. They've tried, but they can't do it. Their histories follow them. The Bible plainly says, "Come out of her, my people." Jesus is speaking to us in the Scriptures in the book of Revelation, chapter 18, talking to his people. He said, "Come out of her, my people." Come out of the Roman Catholic Church. What? Come out of the Roman Catholic Church, the only church on earth where salvation is obtainable? That's what Jesus said. "Come out of her, my people, that you partake not of her sins, and that you receive not also of her plagues." There are plagues coming upon the Roman Catholic Church. You don't want to be in a country mile of a Roman Catholic Church when God's justice descends, any more than you would want to be within a country mile of Pharaoh's castle in Egypt when the plagues descended upon Egypt. "Come out of her, my people, that you partake not of her sins, and that you receive not also of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities." But the trouble is, the really hard part about it is, there's almost nothing that separates the Protestant and evangelical churches now from the Roman Catholic Church. They're all ecumenical. They all believe the same lie, that the Antichrist is future, that they all must unite Christianity, that there be no dissension among the so-called Christian denominations, and especially not against Rome. How dark can the darkness get? The darkness is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then they call the 10th century the Dark Ages. How can it be that the 10th century was any darker than it is today? In our age of enlightenment, in our age of education, in our age of literacy. Literacy is what saved all the first, second, third, all the way through. Literacy is what saved God's people. They were able to read and understand the Bible. So Rome put an end to literacy and prospered like no other time in history during the Dark Ages. The midnight of the world was the noonday for the papacy. The Iron Age for the world was the Golden Age for the papacy. And here, today, we live in an even more remarkable time because we're literate. Society's literate, able to read the Scriptures for themselves, able to read and understand if they have the help of the Holy Spirit. There's a Bible on every countertop, in every closet, on every nightstand. There's a Bible, and all you got to do is pick it up and read it, and you can instantly recognize who the Antichrist is so long as you know history. Look, I don't want to abbreviate my discussion of this John the 13th. We're going to continue, but I've got a point to make, a very important point that cannot be missed. What is Bible prophecy? It's God foretelling the future, right? God prophesies, and history records their fulfillment. Now, if God prophesies the rise of the man of sin, the son of perdition, and says certain things about him, identifiable characteristics about him, how do we know that this prophecy's been fulfilled? By studying history, because prophecy is history predicted. Well, what if somebody hides from you the history of the Antichrist? Then you cannot tell that Antichrist is in the world. And that's why this history's been hidden from you. And that's why it was so easy to sell you the greatest deception since the Garden of Eden, that the Antichrist is just one single man perched at the very end of time just before Christ returns. But now, if you know the history of these profligate popes, you have paused, you have reason to pause and think for a minute now, don't you? Now, what's more believable? That one man can deceive the whole world? Or that a whole college of popes throughout the entire Christian era could deceive the people? Listen, that the history that I'm reading now today is so rare and so unknown to God's people, it took a great power to hide this information, didn't it? And who do you think wants to hide this information more than anyone else? The papacy, isn't it? Doesn't that qualify him for the man of sin, deceiver of the whole world? And what about the lives of these profligate popes? How could anyone be called holy? Holy Father, Your Eminence, Vicar of Christ on earth, sweet Christ on earth. Which one of them could be named with anything but the term this author used to describe him? Monster. Monster's kind of synonymous with Antichrist, isn't it? You see how important history is? History and the Bible go together. You stop the study of history, or you prevent the study of history, you poke a man's eye out. He's only got one eye to see with. You cut a man's right hand off, all he's got is one hand to work with. History and prophecy go together. They're inseparable. And anyone who tries to study the Scripture, tries to study biblical prophecy without any knowledge of history, lives a perpetual life of mystery. Leads a perpetual life of speculation. Nothing is certain. It's all conjecture. But if you have a knowledge of history, history reads just like the Scripture. History reads just like the prophecies that God uttered through His prophets. And there's no mystery. There's no conjecture. There's no speculation. And I'm telling you, there's no mystery. There's no conjecture. And there's no speculation when I tell you, as this author does, and all the other authors that I've read here on Inquisition Update, the papacy is, was, and always will be the Antichrist. There's not a second runner-up. There's not even another candidate for that office. You cannot get it wrong. God does not play fast and loose with the lives, the souls of the that He sent His Son to bleed and die for. He's precious in informing his people to preserve them from being deceived. He gave us historians that accounts for every diabolical detail of the history of the papacy. And just as surely as we know Jesus is the Christ, we are equally convinced the papacy is the Antichrist. End of subject. We owe a debt of gratitude, an unspeakable debt of gratitude, for the prophets of the Bible who told us who the Antichrist is, and for the historians of the world who confirmed it. Now, if you've learned one thing important this week, it is that history goes with prophecy. History is meaningless without prophecy, and prophecy is meaningless without history. And the papacy knows this. And all the kings of the earth know this. And that's why this history has been suppressed. It leaves open the possibility that the Pope is a holy man, when history leaves no opportunity. Okay? Still be it remembered, this monster, John the 12th, is reckoned among the regular line of the popes. The next of the name is called John the 13th, and he is therefore an essential, necessary link in the boasted chain of apostolic succession. No sooner had the Emperor Otho left Rome than several of the licentious women of the city with whom Pope John had been accustomed to spend the greater portion of his time, in concert with several persons of rank, like the whole College of Cardinals, conspired to murder the new pope and to restore John to his see. The former was fortunate enough to make his escape to the emperor, then at Camerino, and the latter was brought back in triumph to the Lateran palace. Upon his return, Pope John seized upon several of the clergy who were opposed to him and inflicted on them the most horrible tortures. Oetger, Bishop of Speyer, was whipped by his command till he was almost dead. Another, Cardinal John, was mutilated by having his right hand cut off, and Azo by the loss of his tongue, nose, and 2 of his fingers. But these horrible enormities were not permitted to continue long. Shortly after his return to the city, the Pope was caught in bed with a married woman and killed on the spot, as some authors say by the devil, but probably by the husband in disguise. This is true history. It's not even disputed by Roman Catholic historians. Subsection 36 before we close the program. But decency demands that we should draw a veil over the further debaucheries and incests of these boasted successors of the Prince of the Apostles and their shameless female associations in guilt and pollution. Let me tell you something. I disagree with this author and every other author that I've read that wants to throw a veil over some of the most ugly stories about the papacy. This is what gives them boldness to commit the most egregious crimes the world has ever seen. They know that people will throw a veil over them and not discuss them. I disagree with this author. I disagree with them all. I'll see you Monday.